Hello everyone, my name is Dalak Bakian, and I'm here to present Saving Rahab, which is a holistic strategy I have designed that aims to empower sex workers who are desiring to exit the sex trade. I'm pitching this proposal on behalf of Help Ziba Support Foundation, which is a rehabilitative and transformative foundation that works with sex workers who are willing to come out of the sex trade. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that is located in sub Saharan Africa, and it currently has over 200 million people as its population. Currently, there's an annual growth rate of about 3 to 4%, and predominantly you have a lot of young people with over 50% of the population being between the ages of 15 to 24. And as we all know it, young people are usually very sexually active, and the ages 15 to 24 is between those ages where sexual activity is quite high. And so you have a lot of our young people who today are sexually active within Nigeria. And also because of the current socioeconomic conditions, we find that the those who are within the reproductive sexual age are also prone to engaging in different types of vices that are not that are anti-productive or even good for them as individuals. So let's talk. Many years ago, I met this lady called Omolola. Omolola is was 19 years old when I met her, and she was living in the brothel as a sex worker. She had run away from home about 6 months earlier because she could not afford to stay with her mother, who could not afford to feed her. So she ran away from home and followed friends who told her she could get work in the sex, she could get work that she could be making money daily. And so that was how she was introduced to the sex trade. Omolola began to ply her body for money, and we met Omolola in one of the field trips where we had gone to do recruitment and discovered that she really needed help. She agreed, and we were able to extract her. And today, Omolola, like many other, a few other women, we have been able to help to have access to partnership organizations that have provided them with help in building a more sustainable life, and also in becoming more empowered to live life afresh outside of the sex trade. So let's talk about Help Zebra. Help Zebra actually has a vision to actually help sex workers. They have the pushed by compassion. They believe that they are able to help sex workers break free from the circle of exploitation that they find themselves as those who are working in the sex trade. And one of the missions is to empower these sex workers who have decided that they want to come out of that life and help them reintegrate themselves into society by providing emergency first aid intervention programs that can help them become better and also be able to support themselves in a sustainable way as they move into the new life. Since 2019, Helpziva has connected over 1,000 sex workers in the last 4 years. They have also provided over 300 sex workers with emergency first aid services, and also helped effectively about 30 sex workers to exit the sex trade effectively and begin to um, build a sustainable life outside of the sex trade. So let's talk about the root cause. Commercial sex work in Nigeria is a complex issue with roots in economic, social, and structural factors. And we know that these factors converge to push individuals, particularly women, into sex work for survival. And we find that some of the contributing factors include economic hardship, there's widespread poverty, inflation is at an all high at 27% as we speak, education and skills gap because there's limited access to quality education, there's gender inequality, there's a huge rural and urban migration because people are trying to find better ways to survive and to find means of economic survival. There's also the issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking seems to be, something that has become very lucrative because of the overpopulation. And there's so many abandoned individuals that have no tag, and nobody is going to ask of them if they go missing. There's also the issue of stigma. Social stigma isolates a lot of sex workers from mainstream society. And you find that even though sex work is criminalized, it has weak legal protections and it still stays illegal. And these are one of the some of the issues that have entrenched the issue of sex work in the society, especially in the Nigerian society where poverty is high. So let's talk about some facts. So basically, as of 2020, statistics tell us that about 10 states in Nigeria were estimate, have about 10 states of Nigeria where sex work is really highly prevalent. And as of 2020, about 874,000 people. Of these people, 63% of them started sex work before the age of 19. 70% of them work from brothels because that is where, the customers are. And 88% of these sex workers actually have to travel far away from home so that people don't know what kind of work they're doing. So we then see that um, the Nigerian legal framework basically does not encourage, any kind of protection for sex workers. While the focus has been so much on sex trafficking, sex workers are left to find their own way and make their own way and find their own protection. And we know that many young women, like Omolola that I talked about at the beginning, face situations where they cannot fend for themselves or find help within their families and have to sell their bodies in exchange for money to survive. Ultimately, this leads to things like breakdown in family dynamics. It's a ripple effect for the society. You find high spread of diseases like HIV, which is highly prevalent amongst the younger population because they are the ones who are actively sexual. And we also find the issue of violence and exploitation, where a lot of sex workers are being brutally murdered or brutalized, by unknown men because they're in a trade that has no value for life or even value for who they are. And basically, we also find that the sex trade in itself continues to contribute to the human trafficking. So while there is a lot of noise about human trafficking and how people are being trafficked and destroyed, we find that there is really nothing that can be done. And all of these things culminates into a breakdown in society and continues to worsen the. So we find that sex work in itself, it's something that has, is highly criminalized. And we know that except sex work is decriminalized, it's going to be impossible for people to actually see it as, something they want to focus on. And so we find that every day more and more people continue to join the sex workers, trade. they continue to offer their bodies up for money because it's the fastest way they can make a living. And so, even though government has focused on some aspects of the sex trade, specifically human trafficking, but they've not really been able to focus on sex workers themselves and how to actually help them, to begin to find alternative ways to make money and to become socio-economically, stable and be able to empower themselves and on. So how do we work? How do we deal with this? Existing strategic features of Hubziba Support Foundation on its own has identified 7 key points where they can tackle this. However, the foundation's operational logic also considers the similarity of the rehabilitative approach, which can be likened to the concept of fully productive entrepreneurship, as highlighted in Ellen and Stenkula, as we had earlier learned in the course. So, what you find is for them to be full productivity, they have to go through all these different phases of the strategy that has been put up. However, there has been a failure to meet up at every point of the strategy due to a lack of resources. So what you find that there has been a focus within the therapy aspect. However, therapy hasn't been done very well. Reorientation is suffering. Partnership and sourcing too is suffering. And all these other aspects are suffering because there's a lack of resources. So what needs to be done is to focus on these different aspects. And so the problem is that even though they're providing for first aid services to sex workers aiming to exit the street, to exit the trade, there's an holistic services um, that does not cater for the full-blown problem. So the only on holistic services basically is not enough to ensure recidivism and provide empowerment support. Helpziba as an organization itself is currently facing challenges with supporting its clients financially, mentally, and emotionally in fulfilling their welfare needs. So you find that this rehabilitation project, you know, does not address the present social issue, which aims to offer them a comprehensive rehabilitation and support services, as the case may be. So, from a holistic rehabilitation point of view, we find that it's really important to think carefully about how to design the most effective intervention programs and projects that can connect to the heart of the clients. And basically, we see this in the dog approach design offers growth, as highlighted in Zia's book Innovation Animals, where it is important that, as we call for rapid experimentation, there's a need to deploy and evaluate every solution that is preferred quickly. So, iteration is important, feedback is important in order to ensure that whatever is being done, is actually having the right effect in terms of intervention. So what happens is that you find that there's a need to collaborate with partnerships, places like skill development workshop that can help to improve the services that is being offered to sex workers as we seek to help them. So we see that really the base of the problem is that there are barriers for those attempting to exit the sex work. So, how can we help with these barriers? Is to actually develop a holistic approach which aims to still keep the emergency first aid services, but ensure that at the end of the day, you know, um, things like stigmatization and discrimination, a lack of support services, trauma, psychological impacts of which these clients are affected are properly addressed so that they don't end up going back and they can also build a sustainable life afterwards. So how do we close the gap? The first one is through rehabilitation. That means offering comprehensive support services, reducing things like stigma and discrimination, giving them alternative economic, options, finding legal reforms and protection to help them. Because at the end of it all, it's all about empowerment. There's a need to empower the sex worker. That means you have to train them, you have to give them skills, you have to help them know that there's a better way to live their lives. And to achieve this, I have come up with a three-step stage. The first one, like we said, is currently being offered, which is the emergency first aid support, and where therapy sessions and vocational training is being offered. Another way is at the stage two, we then have a peer support network where experienced former sex workers guide and mentor newcomers who are coming in. And then there is a workshop and training session that helps to develop practical and transferable skills. And ultimately, it's all about collaborating with local businesses through existing second chance employer network where it is available. And if it's not available, the whole idea is to be able to create one. So let's take a look at the competitive landscape. Existing alternatives basically within the sex trade and those who are offering rehabilitative services is largely through religious organizations who run shelters that are not really, properly run or adequately run. And often these shelters do not have all that is needed. Also, you have government partnerships with some form of not-profit organizations where much of the funds that are given do not really focus on the sex worker. And then we have the non-specialized rehabilitation homes who once in a while just get funding and just once in a while offer like on the surface kind of support or offering a service to help the sex workers. And so there is really no holistic transformation approach that proposes potentially long-term effectiveness aimed at actually helping the sex workers to reintegrate into society. For this project to be successful, it's going to be important to actually have the right kind of partnerships. And that means that the partnerships that will help us, in innovating the right kind of strategies that will help us bring the sex workers to where they need to be. And the basis of partnership is simply so that we can have a holistic approach in variance to what we already had on ground that wasn't functioning. Now we're able to have other people contributing into developing the intervention programs that are needed. So and that means that things like underlying social, economic, and psychological factors will now be taken into consideration in variance to just offering, emergency services that, we don't have control over and, just pointing them in a direction. Um, these partnerships with government agencies, with all the necessary stakeholders within the community, and whether home and abroad is going to be able to give us a more robust, holistic approach to help our clients to solve their problems. So let's talk about our target audience. Basically, our primary target are young women because we find that within the ecosystem, there are different ages and different stages. However, the most vulnerable amongst them are the ages 11 to 19-year-old young women who have no family, no support, and they're ready and willing to, be reintegrated and to actually leave the sex trade because there has to be willingness first of all before we can offer services. And the same goes for the secondary target, which are underage males, ages between 7 and 15 years, and they are also seeking this help. So without the consent of of the target audience, it's almost impossible to offer them the solution that they need. So, who are the beneficiaries and stakeholders? We have active sex workers, or who will be benefiting the local community. All of this foundation activities will have a positive impact on all the stakeholders within the community, including partners, who will be collaborating with local businesses, such as educational institutions, who will be also be taking, they will be needing their services as they get trained. We will also, be needing stakeholders like those who are going to be donating, local and community businesses that are able to support the sex workers as they come out and try to reintegrate into the family, into the community. So, what are the key benefits? The whole idea is to be able to just break the cycle of poverty and bring about empowerment to the sex workers. Invariably, it will also help them to have better health through counseling and psychosocial support, and increase employability opportunities for sustainable income. So, what are the potential challenges to ensuring that um, this project, gets to to see the light? One Many of the things is usually the most important things are usually the resistance to change internally. So for Hepzibah Support Foundation, they're already used to doing the short term um, emergency, supports that they're given, and it might be a bit difficult telling them, okay, we can actually make it more holistic, but we need to look at ways to do it. Another thing is the lack of buy-in from participants, and those are the sex workers themselves who are already used to just coming and getting the emergency aid and going away. So to give them a more holistic solution, it will take more time. And some of them may not even want to come forward and spend such amount of time because of the social stigma and that is involved. So we will find resistance to change while embarking on this journey. So, what are our initial budget considerations? So, our considerations basically revolves around personnel because it takes people to help people. So, it will be important that we have trained counselors. We are able to have people who would do outreach and engage with the sex workers, who are able to also support through training and development, and teach them what needs to be done. And it will also mean that we will be using people who are already experienced with this in terms of the sex work, who have come out and are now able to also give back. We will also need the support of legal and regulatory compliance, the police, the magistrate systems within the community, and all of those who generally see sex work as something bad. So we'll also be needing a lot of web and social media presence, because this will be the fastest way to actually create awareness and advocacy that is needed within the community, as the case may be. So, what our proposed budgets? Proposed budget basically is heavy on personnel costs, like I earlier said, but we're looking at between $200,000 to $306,000, and the bulk of that will be going to personnel. However, the cost benefit here is that we can look at how to start with a smaller scale pilot project and seek funding and grants based on this success. We can also utilize online training, and we can do collaborations with organizations where they're able to support us by giving us free education. There's also a way we can reduce cost, by also finding shared facilities, um, getting donations from the community, and even getting the people to volunteer their professional services. And once we're able to actually look at this, we find that at the end of the day, we might be able to cut the bulk of that cost in half, and even get a huge chunk off of it in order to be able to, gain the support and the things that is needed eventually. So, in conclusion, according to D'Souza, learning is not a one time deal. It basically should be built into every stage of the process and promoted at all levels, from individuals to groups to the organization. So, what this invariably means is that it's important that monitoring and evaluation is really critical part of learning. And so, as we go through this project, we're going to be learning a lot because this is a terrain we've really not charted. So, and because we're going to be working, seeking to provide holistic services, there will need for us to be a need for us to be systematic. Um, and because being systematic also helps us to gather insights and make informed decisions and adapt our strategies based on the real results that we're seeing. It will also help us to identify where our successes are, where our challenges are, and continue to foster, you know, um, a learning culture. And it will also keep the team accountable, learning from our mistakes, being able to adapt and making use of evidence-based decisions and continuously improving the process until we find ourselves where we need to be. So these are my references. Thank you for listening. I look forward to your feedback.